Kia ora, thanks all. That was the whistle. If we could just drop, cover, hold. All right. Kia ora, thank you all. We have had the all clear. Oh. Kia ora koutou, ngā mihi nui. Thank you all for just participating in the shakeout. I think over 666,000 Kiwi New Zealanders had signed up to do that drill this morning. It's an incredibly important part to just practice good emergency preparedness. And Kevin, the very fantastic warden, has some info sheets at the front desk if you'd like to get yourself and your community more prepared. With that, no mai haere mai ki tēnei hui. Welcome Sam and Baz to talk to us about the advisory group's mahi today. And I will just point out we do have, I think the word external is not quite appropriate because when you are a part of the advisory group whānau, you are most definitely a part of the council family. So I just wanted to note to colleagues today that we have the advisory group chairs present and Sahina and Daniel also coming to talk to us as well. Over to you both.
Kia ora tātou. It's fantastic to speak to you about the advisory group's mahi this morning. And I want to recognise the significant contribution that our advisory group whānau has been making for decades now for the council. Over the time, we've gradually increased the number of advisory groups that we have, and they have done incredibly valuable service. But also over that time, we've had a number of reviews where we've found some sticky issues relating to the model. So that's the reason why we're doing this work today. I want to recognise the co-chairs and members of the advisory groups who have contributed really generously to this work, and also to a wide range of staff who've been involved. We had workshops with the advisory groups, and I've been attending those meetings regularly, but also we had a workshop with you as well, elected members, and your feedback was really valuable too. So I think I'll move on to the next slide. When do I find? Here we go. This is the direction and mandate for the work. This is the resolution that was passed. You'll see that there was a range of work involved, and so in addition to exploring a full range of options for the future model for the advisory groups, there was an instruction to create a new advisory group, an ethnic communities advisory group, and to involve ethnic communities in the development and thinking about the future model. So that work has been happening concurrently. I'll be focusing on that development of the range of options for the future model. We came to you in April to start talking about a problem statement, and it became increasingly clear as we got feedback that we should turn that round and consider it an opportunity. So you'll find the original problem statement was this first half, which is how do we lift community voices and integrate them into strategic decision making. And the second part has evolved as the work has, which is how do we in addition support intersectionality and enable more transparent and collective advice. Initially I'd gone with the word cohesive, but what I wanted to make clear and why it was changed in the language there is that it's about pulling these voices together but not insisting that they all agree. So, but encouraging in these times where often our voices are being pulled apart, that we do come together and share each other's thinking and come to places where we also agree. So the next two slides, I'll take you through a summary of the engagement we've done, and the following one is a summary of the research. And then I'll introduce you to two members of the staff of Aotearoa Refugee and Migrant Support Services, who led the work to do a focus group with our ethnic communities. It was important that, knowing that the Ethnic Communities Advisory Group would not be ready in time to input into this work, that we also heard their voices. So focusing at the moment on the engagement, as I mentioned before, we've worked with the advisory groups, with staff and with elected members. And there were these 8 key themes that came through in our engagement. The most important one, and many of these themes are identical to the previous 3 to 4 reviews that have been undertaken, so they will not be a surprise, is there's a real lack of clarity about the role. The inconsistent engagement leads to strain on relationships and affects the outcomes. Partly this is from that lack of role clarity, but it's also from the fact that we have a largely devolved model, which means that a whole range of staff are coming to the groups with big and small projects, and often the advisory groups are giving the exact same advice. Particularly the fourth one about this undue pressure, it was particularly a huge pressure for the Environmental Reference Group, who've done an enormous number of submissions, but all groups have done submissions, and it creates quite a heavy workload. There was a real interest in pulling voices together. Some of the groups have met together and found that really valuable, and they've also particularly found the occasions where we've brought all the groups together for a cross-group session on things such as the LTP. They've found those really valuable because they've often found that there are issues in common. There was strong support for a significant reset. They want to feel that the model has changed, and that provides an opportunity to improve the outcomes. And also a really strong interest in increasing Māori participation. And when we look at the research, and I go slipping to the bottom of the 4 bullet points under there about research, I want to that's terrible. I want to acknowledge Auckland Council. They were very generous with sharing their experiences, and we had a trip up there, and it was greatly appreciated. And while their model is different in that it's just so much bigger scale, we learnt some very valuable lessons. We've also been undertaking literature review, looking at our statistical data, and we had our ethnic communities focus group, which you'll hear more about shortly. The key findings there, again, C8, is this value in uniting diverse communities in the international research, that smaller groups are significantly more effective, that respect and relationship is really key in this space, the value of bringing that range of identities together, representing population diversity in our increasingly diverse communities, that the machine behind it is really important. Process, facilitation, consistent, strong support is key to the, that you need many engagement tools, and that advisory groups are one of those. The advisory group does not fill the whole role for youth or for any of the other 5 existing and 6 to be advisory groups. That refreshing and providing fresh perspectives helps rejuvenate groups as you go along. Now, I'll pause here for a minute because we'll bring our guests up to the table. They will talk to you for about 5 or 7 minutes, just taking you through the findings, and then there'll be an opportunity for questions, and we'll pause there. They need to leave at 10:15, so we're focusing for time. Just one moment.
No, Mai, Sahina and Daniel, thanks for joining us at the table. Yeah, I was just going to let you know, push the button in front of you on the microphone, and if it's glowing green, then we can all hear you.
Good morning, everyone. Now, my Harimai. I hope everyone is doing good. Lovely to see you all here. And it's our very prestigious opportunity to be a part of this, and we could present the findings and what all we did in the focus groups. So I'll just take you very briefly through the methods we followed. So how we recruited the participants, how we collected the data, and how we went about generating the report. And at the end, we'll just be briefly focusing on the facilitators' feedback. So we did have 4 facilitators for the focus groups. And these facilitators had some very interesting feedback that contributed to the report. So basically, we had a large pool of participants, and we shortlisted them down to 14. And these participants were very, very involved with the communities, with the different diverse ethnic communities, and that's how we shortlisted them. And they got the opportunity to participate in the focus groups. So on this day, when we had these focus groups, they were divided into 3 groups, and we tried to make them very diverse in terms of the age, their gender, in terms of their participation with the ethnic engagements. So in that way, the groups were very multicultural and diverse in nature. So the focus groups were basically, they were given some questions which we had previously formulated, those questions, and they were given these questions to discuss within these groups. So once these, they brainstormed and they came up with the answers, the facilitators wrote them down, and then later on we went for the data collection and how we generated the report. So very brief on that, and I'll hand it over to Dan, who will be focusing more on the report, on the findings. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. I'm just going to read through the slides here if we just keep it brief as possible so you have room for questions. So the role and purpose, strategic advice, provide fact-based input and for council decision-making, community representation, advocate for diverse ethnic communities' needs, and cultural sensitivity, offer unbiased, cultural appropriate guidance. And challenges here, we're really focusing on these 3 points. So balancing individual perspectives with the voices of diverse communities is really important. And a challenge there, providing opportunities for community involvement at crucial stages and promoting diverse representation in the selection process. Addressing these challenges, we use the data collection and gather the information directly from the community groups and interacting with the members to identify specific problems and conduct period reviews to ensure continuous improvement. So the proposed solutions, they're also regular check-ins, so maintaining focus and address emerging issues promptly, improved recruitment, so enhance the process to ensure diverse, culturally aware members are included, and role clarity there, differentiate between advisory and advocacy responsibilities. The potential risks that we gleaned were personal gain, so members may prioritise individual interests over group objectives. There's the potential for divided interests, so conflicts may arise from differing perspectives within the group themselves. Information sharing, so inadequate communication may hinder the group effectiveness. We've got group focus and representation. So we're focusing on diverse advice, challenging the status quo to provide solutions for varied ethnic groups, community recognition, maintain trust by re-engaging after decision making, inclusive representation, strive to represent entire community with a focus on inclusivity. Toolkit and induction for those members, so a comprehensive onboarding, developing a toolkit for new members, understanding. Privacy and security needs to be prioritised for confidentiality to ensure groups' overall trust. Accessible feedback and implement user-friendly online feedback methods for participants. And here's just some summary of our facilitators' feedback. So, inclusive selection, advisory members should represent all ethnicities, not just their own, and be chosen based on their ability to reflect diverse perspectives. Recruitment strategies, outreach to ethnic communities should go beyond current methods, ensuring accessibility for all. And I'll just touch on something there. So an example that we had in the advisory group, we noticed that the current method is through council's Facebook page, things like that, and not everyone's using the internet, not everyone has access to Facebook, or not everyone is reading English all the time in their everyday life. It's not their main source of language. So yeah, I made a few suggestions around that at the time. The geographic representation, so consider suburban ethnic minorities in selection to ensure broad representation. Effective engagement, encourage open, positive communication, free from barriers like faith, politics, or language. And the criteria concerns, current selection criteria may exclude capable individuals, calling for a more inclusive approach. One other thing I just wanted to mention as well is that during the evening when we did the advisory group presentation to the panel, I found that there were a lot of members just understanding that they were being categorised into specific ethnic classifications. I'll give you an example. There was a gentleman from I think Uganda, and he was understanding that he's always been labelled as African, and Africa is a continent. It is not a country. It is not an ethnic group. It is not a like a tribal people, or it doesn't. Yeah, the identity is skewed there. I myself, I'm half Persian, half European. If I wanted to go into great detail, my European side is a mixture of Spanish, Welsh, Irish, Scottish. It's a big, broad mix. So in that context, I do understand for statistical reasons that it might be easy to classify people into continents. But my Persian side, I would not identify with Middle East. Middle East to me is a Western construct, and I find that to be partially quite offensive, especially with what's going on in a global context at the moment. My culture is not reflective of the country of Iran and their political agendas at the current time. So I think we need to be very careful and respectful of people and how they identify themselves with their ethnicity or their cultural identities. Yeah.
Thank you, Shahina and Daniel. I want to restate what a pleasure it was to be a part of the process and the valuable input that your organisation provided, and the generous way that you worked with us to find something that was really valuable in our journey to look at advisory groups. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for having us.
Aye. Sam, are we able to take some Pātai questions? Councillor Abdurrahman.
Kia ora whanau, and thank you so much for your work on this, and it's lovely to see, and it's my understanding as well, 90% of your organizations who work for your organization, they are from refugee and migrant background. Can you confirm that?
Sorry, you mean the staff?
Yes.
Or you mean the clients?
The staff.
The staff, yeah, we are diverse in terms of our ethnicities, cultural backgrounds, different linguistic. Yeah.
My question to you is, when you talk about advocacy and advice, and we're talking about an ethnic community that's diverse and challenging the status quo, how do you challenge the status quo when you're trying to stick to the governance model? You are part of it, part of the establishment, when your job is to challenge that status quo, which means that is advocacy. How do you manage those two things?
Would you like to answer that? Yeah, more of the workshop.
Sure. So from my understanding, within our work that we do for clients, when we're working in our roles for Aotearoa Refugee Migrant Support Services, we are doing advocacy work specifically. When we're working alongside council, then we are... sorry.
Not you actually. If you, let's say those advocates, the member of ethnic advisory group, you say the challenge will be how advocacy and advice can be a challenge for them, the members who will be sitting in that.
Right,
governing
I'm
board.
with you now, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so, yeah, I mean, it would just be, I think, a responsibility of whenever this advocacy group is set up formally, that it would need to be outlined very clearly and defined very clearly. That's what we're basically saying in the form of advocacy and advising. So it's a matter of communicating that down to the participants in the advisory group, so that they understand their roles specifically. When they're in the advisory group, they need to stick to advising, not advocating for individuals or for their own benefit.
Thank you, Councillor. Excellent. I can put you back on the list, but we might need to jump to another. Councillor Matthews.
Kia ora, korua. Thank you for the work. That's this is such a helpful part of this process, so just want to express my appreciation. I'm interested in the point that was made about the criteria and how that could exclude some good people, and I just wanted to understand a little bit more about what that meant.
Okay, sorry. So the method we followed actually was we had these invites sent out to a lot of the community people out there, and Wellington City Council helped us with that. They definitely had this huge database and they helped us with that in that process. So we sent out these invites to these people and then just requesting them if they would want to participate in the study that's happening, and some of them showed the interest. And when we shortlisted them, so the first thing we kept in mind was their community connections. So how deeply engaged in the community they are, what sort of work they are doing in the community. So some people we had who were some president of some community organization. Some of them we had was just a dance teacher, so we excluded the dance teacher because we, in the greater picture, we thought the dance teacher is not actually getting involved in the community, whereas other person we found that they were supporting other people in the community, doing a lot of charity work and doing a lot of, the mainstream community work, supporting the community. So that was our main inclusion criteria. And the second one was we thought that we'll keep it very diverse. So males and females were included in the study, and also the variation in the age groups. So, but the main focus was on the community connections.
Just to, I interpreted that last point about being that the criteria for a member of an advisory group could be exclusionary. Is that, have I misinterpreted that?
Yes, we did.
So I was kind of interested in which criteria and what good people might be excluded.
Yes.
But it was for focus group, but one issue that did come up in relation to people who were involved or new people, and it was actually a really excellent way of getting the word out that we were actually setting up a new advisory group. But one challenge we did find is because they're quite connected communities, and often the heart of the community is not in Wellington City, it's out in Porirua, or it's out in the hut, and so for some they and our current terms of reference mean you must be in the city, and that can be an issue in relation to the advisory group members.
Thank you both. Thank you.
Kia ora. Councillor Pannett.
Kia ora. Thank you so much for all your work. One thing I was just curious about is there was some point on which sort of said that people would come, what was the wording, free of politics and language. I think that was the wording, something like that. And I was just curious how people do that, given we are all a product of our culture and language. And just obviously, talking about Western constructs, this is a Western construct, this whole council. So how people sort of come in when they've got a completely different cultural background, come into this place which has got a particular history.
So on the first part, I would just say that we really need to think about those people that are coming in and into these advisory groups, and understanding that they would be given a briefing to understand that although they're coming in as an advisory group to council with their own perspectives from their ethnic communities, regarding the political, the faith, all those sort of things, it's trying to understand that they would need to be wary of when they're advising council not to try and have to try and remove their unconscious bias, basically, to try and have a focus around how they might, on a geopolitical landscape, they might have certain feelings or emotional ties to certain ideologies. It's really important for them to be able to voice their perspectives without holding too much gravity towards their own personal beliefs. So, but still advising for the community as a whole, but not holding on to their own personal ideologies too tightly. Does that answer that one for you? Yeah. The second one around Western construct. Yeah, maybe not the nicest choice of words by me. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I think in a nutshell, I would have to say that we have to work with what we have. So you're right. This is what we have. These are the constructs we have, and these are the dynamics that council has to work with themselves, given legislation and how things are, put together. And I would say that yes, people are going to be coming from different backgrounds, different experiences, and they are going to be coming with a different viewpoint. I think it's just a matter of showing polite respect to people for how they identify and how they perceive the world themselves, not necessarily saying that that they have to fit within their own way of thinking. The best example I could give for that is I myself, I can say that from as an ethnic person, as well as a European, part ethnic person, I can say that I don't mind being classified as European for statistical purposes or for whatever is needed. But I would rather be called Asian for my ethnic part of my ethnicity rather than Middle Eastern. And it's a simple, tiny tweak. I don't think that those sort of things are really that hard for council to adapt to. Yeah.
And really important to ensure we hold the mana of each person as a multifaceted person rather than someone as just one label or one box. I had a question. I just wondered if you spoke about reducing barriers, and I wondered if there were any strong reflections from working with the community that kind of highlighted barriers people have with working with council or engaging with council in the past, or even just through the advisory group model or outside of that?
From what I recall, the main thing was actually the communications and also the onboarding of people. So the way that, as I mentioned earlier, the way that council, I was advised by some council staff members on the night, the way we were advised was that council are currently advertising through Facebook to recruit these sort of people to come into and advertising, say, hey, sign up to be part of this advisory group. Whereas I think it needs to go a slight step further. And I made the suggestion on the night myself that you go around the city and you go into the different multicultural suburbs of Wellington. A prime example would be Newtown. And some of the larger billboards, the ones that are at street level, I think they're called A0 size. Yeah, some advertising like that. How you guys, how people advertise when there are political elections going on and party members put their profile up, and yeah, I think a little bit of a bit more out there advertising that people walking past on the street see it rather than just people on their devices.
Kia ora. Pātai from Councillor Free.
Is it Fazana? Sorry, can you say it again?
Shahina.
Shahina.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for both coming. I think it's Daniel, isn't it? I picked that one up. In an ideal world, what would you be hoping would be the outcome of this group? What would you hope it could achieve?
I think it would be more inclusive in terms of the multicultural aspect of New Zealand, because New Zealand is more of a multicultural place where different people from different ethnicities, they are finding it as their home. So I believe it would be more culturally inclusive in terms of having equal rights for all. Yeah, that's how I see it.
We'd be able to make the city feel more inclusive.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank
I'll
you.
just give a small example. The other day, sorry, my throat is really going crazy. So the other day, there was this news up in Auckland, even one in Wellington, that a woman wearing hijab was just taken off her hijab. Some people just took off her hijab, yes. And it was really crazy because the incident that happened in Auckland, she was in the middle of the afternoon at 2:30 p.m. She was walking down from her office back home, and she was wearing a hijab, and some people attacked her and took off her hijab and was verbally abusive. Go back to your land. This is not your land. Where you have come from, you go back to your place. Don't ever call it home. So things like these are increasing. So we don't want these sort of things to happen, and we also want Wellington City Council to take a very proactive measure so that everyone feels safe.
Yeah, okay. And Daniel, you were going to say something. Thank you. You were going to say something too, I think.
I guess I just wanted to add to the fact that when I bring it down to how we onboard clients into our organisation, we make it very clear to them that they're coming from maybe a different culture, and their idea of parenting, for example, might be different to what a lot of New Zealanders might perceive parenting to be, and legislation or laws around parenting and the types of parenting that is allowed in New Zealand, and we're having to help educate these families that are coming to say, hey, you have a style of parenting. This is going to be the long-term outcome for your children, and this is another style of parenting you could try. This is going to be the long-term outcome for your children. And so what I really just want to use that as an analogy to help council understand that if we're being respectful of other people's cultures and understanding their cultures, but also educating the peoples on how New Zealand, as a broader context, how we see ourselves as peoples, it can be beneficial to them. But also thinking about how these people, it's really important we make it very clear to them that it's great for you to learn how to fit in with New Zealand culture, but it's also very, very important to retain your own culture, to hold on to that, because it's part of who you are. It's your essence. It's where your roots are. And I think that council, if they're open to understanding multiple cultures, and because, like Sahina said, we are a multicultural society, so I think being open to hearing the viewpoints and seeing the viewpoints of all people's ways of thinking is really, it's really an advantage for council. Yeah.
Can I ask another question?
One more.
So, having said that, the visibility is quite important. How do you think this group could reflect, the Multicultural Advisory Group, how would it be quite necessary for council to reflect the fact that we're doing this work with different cultures, just to raise the profile of it? That's too hard.
Sorry,
don't worry.
can you reframe the question?
I was thinking that the visibility of this work would be really important. So it would be important that it just doesn't take place in a room, but that the wider community, Wellington, is aware of the fact that we're working with an ethnic group.
Yeah, I can.
How could we best display that?
I can think of one just really quick example. I'm not sure if you guys are still going to be putting out your quarterly, or is it biannually little booklet of what's on in Wellington type thing. Too early. Yeah. It's not.
We're doing it online.
Oh, online. Yeah. Sorry, Sahin. So if you're doing it online, you usually have a good lot of imagery of cartoon style imagery of people around different parts of Wellington. Include a person wearing a hijab. Include people of different colour, of different, wearing different cultural clothing.
Okay.
These sorts of very simple tweaks can really make people feel like hey, this is my home too.
And I'm sure once the group gets going, there'll be lots more suggestions.
And yeah, and I feel we can start off at the basic level, like from the schools, we can have the school notice boards, we can have the library, we can have the supermarket notice boards, so advertising in that grassroots level. Yeah.
Kia ora. Pātai from Councillor Chung.
Thank you very much for coming in this morning. I'm wondering if I guess I'm thinking about that fact that you said that a lot of people, so a lot of good people are actually excluded from this, from coming on to the board, the advisory group. Do you think that there's any of these that would be reluctant to actually engage in a government or local government liaison? Because I'm finding that some of my neighbours from Botswana and Russia who say that, we come from a country where we don't really engage with the government, and so they said it's quite a big move for them when they come to New Zealand to start thinking we can trust the government, we can work with the government to actually get the things we like, because when they come from in their own countries they don't actually have that option. And so do you think that's a major thing that we need to actually look at, or to try and educate people to say that we want to work together with you?
Yeah, we did have a person in the focus group, and that person recently migrated to New Zealand. So it's been 1 year that she's come to New Zealand, and she had really nice visions for small things, how the city council can improve in terms of the services, reaching out to the greater majority of people. So in that way, we found that if we include such newcomers, they have more, vision and a greater sense of, because they're coming from a different land, right? And they can see the tiny errors or the gaps that are there in the system. Yeah.
Kia ora.
I think I missed answering Nurdin's second question, and I'm not sure I remember what it was. I'm sorry. I just wanted to give him the chance to ask that again, if that was possible.
All good, I don't remember as well. But you guys did a good job, and
Sorry.
we're looking forward to this. And thank you for the hard work.
I don't see any further hands up around the table for questions, so just wanted to acknowledge you both again and thank you very much for all the mahi that you do and your advocacy and your engagement with communities, and thank you so much for being a part of this process.
Ngā mihi.
Kia ora. Thank you.
Kia pai te rā.
Cool.
Kia ora tātou anō. I was really looking forward to hearing the report back. The fuller report is available to you as well. It was an excellent process, and I think the participants had that added challenge of trying to think what it would be like in an advisory group space and what would help them to provide advice in that space. And not all of the participants had been involved in anything similar, but what struck me was that their advice was very similar to the other parts in the system that we worked with, and it was very incisive. So bringing us back to where we were before, having based on the research and the engagement, including the focus group that you've just heard about, we boiled it down to 5 criteria to assess the future models. Enabling of clear, cohesive, strategic advice, a process that supports the outcomes, enhancing that positive and trust-filled relationships, and the relationships seem very key to the success of the system. Embedding and embracing Te Ao Māori and Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and creating safe spaces and to provide confident and effective contribution. So it had to be a model that provides, is flexible to what would make each of the identity groups feel safe. So here we go. This is what we feel would drive a reset in this model. And so you can see on the left-hand side, a description of the current model, where we want to drive to in the middle, and then the why. So there was quite a striking voice that stays in my head where they talked about nobody enjoys the transactional element of this, and it kind of subbed it up for me. Moving from transactional to our relationships. Also, the administrative style of the current model and moving to strategic, because for these voices to be effective, they need to be inputting at the strategic level, not giving the same advice over and over again about various small and large projects. For some, feeling undervalued, and moving it towards a circle of uplift, which is what we meant by mana enhancing. Uplift, positive, repeated positive experience that support good outcomes. Currently we're meeting, our terms of reference focuses on having a set number of meetings at set intervals and trying to say, actually, this should be driven by the work program across the tri-union. The voices are siloed, and we would like to make it more cohesive and transparent so people can hear the different voices and deliberate with them, the back and forth. Definitely about the lack of an agreed role. We've explored that before. It needs to be clear and easily understood. This model was started in the 90s, and we have moved towards a stronger support for our partnership with mana whenua and Māori, and as a result, the current model does not do that. As I mentioned, the terms of reference around there and the way we currently do is quite constrained, and we want to be responsive and learning and iterative. So what you'll see in the next two slides is lifting out that middle panel and thinking about the how. So for relationship enhancement, we're thinking about focusing on relationships first and providing safer, more cultural responses spaces. For strategic, we're thinking about shifting the scope up to those higher level strategic matters and projects. We're looking at the agenda being driven by the Wellington City Council's strategy and policy program, and so that they can provide the input will then be fed down right across the organisation. Improving our recruitment processes, and you heard a few bits of the feedback just before about how recruitment is really key to this. Reaching out through our networks and providing the opportunity, but also focusing, as we learned in Auckland, on the fact that we want to bring people who can engage at a strategic and a collaborative way to provide cohesive advice from their groups and then lift it up into a panel. Mana enhancing, we've talked about that, and work program driven. I'll move on to the second slide. Here we go. Whoops, too far. The option of lifting our model to provide a transparent place for deliberation and different voices, so that currently what happens is that generally staff will go to all or some of the groups. Whatever advice that is given to them is then ameliorated through the staff member or who they work with on an individual basis, and by bringing together of voices, we can actually allow that amelioration to happen in a transparent way, so that you can see, well, but that means this in our space, and what does that mean for us collectively together? For better support for our partnership, thinking about how we lift, and you'll see in the next one around the panel of involving Paul Iwi in the elected member connection to this proposed model, and lifting the membership for Māori, and this learn and adjust as we go. So moving on into what our options are, a range of options that we are currently thinking about. You've got your current status quo, but the addition of the Ethnic Communities Advisory Group, it's largely siloed, and if the decision was to go to leave the model at the status quo, we could make a few additional tweaks, just bearing in mind that that has been the outcome of previous reviews and it hasn't sustained good change. The hybrid model, which I'll come to and explain more fully, which is the recommended option. And then you could conceivably, number 3 is you could conceivably lift all the members from our current and including the ethnic communities advisory group, pull them together and have them as a one entity. That's not recommended because it's not, I don't think it will provide the support for the different identity groups. Just moving back to the number 2, in making it a clear role, what we've done over time is we've expected our advisory group members to bring their lived experience, but also be technical experts for us. And it's not a reasonable request. If we need technical expertise, it should be within our organisation or contracted in. So examples of this is that now we have planning across to move towards universal design and accessibility. We're not expecting our AAG members to provide universal design advice. Allowing people to focus on the identity they're bringing and doing things in an appropriate way for our community should be the way we provide good service. So that is why the Environmental Reference Group is a reference group. It provides technical expertise. And my suggestion is that you move that to a bi-monthly mayoral forum and focus on our identities that we're lifting. So the 4th model is about finishing the advisory groups and leaning into the citizens' assembly type model that we've used. Again, I'm not recommending that because although citizens' assemblies are very powerful, and provide through their sortition a range that represents the statistically across our community, it doesn't lift individual voices that we need to hear at times. So focusing, I've probably covered this because this is the 4 potential ones and their pros and cons. Yep, I'll come back to that again if you have any questions shortly. This is the model, you can see more detail, which I'm recommending, which is a hybrid model, which is that we have the 5 identity groups with ERG moved and recognised as having a significantly different function, and that we drive it from a combined panel of looking at our strategic projects and our strategic decisions such as the LTP. So there's an opportunity within each of the identity groups to deliberate and discover around the projects and policies that we're bringing to them, and then with an understanding that they're bringing their voice to a panel across the top where there's opportunity to explore the intersectionality. So this is just articulating again which projects would go to what in the new model, that the strategic advisory groups would be that preparation space to explore. They'd also, in addition to strategic matters and strategic projects, they might be identity-specific matters that they would be wanting to interface, which would be such as Youth Hub or Pacifica or some kind of accessibility planning. So the 2 levels, this is the top level, just summarising that, and this is my 3rd to last slide. The combined strategic advisory panel would look at those high-level strategic matters and strategic projects. They would meet 3 to 4 times per year. They would allow and involve elected members and ELT. And then you would also, in addition, have that second layer, which is the identity advisory groups, which has a bit of a more detail about that. Towards the bottom, I haven't focused on that training, just as the findings of the Ethics Communities Advisory Group, the pre-panel, the focus group that we held, the importance of induction and training so that people can understand local government sufficiently to be able to provide advice, and also to get that opportunity to get to know their group members and operate really well as a team together. So that is my last slide. Thank thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Mahi, thank you. Yeah, we do have some good time there for just questions at this stage, and then if we have time, we'll get feedback. Councillor Chung first.
I tend to look at your hybrid recommendation and think that's actually a very good suggestion, because I've been thinking quite a lot into this lately, because I've been meeting with a lot of different groups.
Chung,
and
Councillor Chung, just questions at this stage.
Okay. So what they're saying is that they see themselves as individual cultural groups, and they don't see an integration into everything that is actually happening out there. And I think the objective is actually to integrate them all so that they can participate in everything that we do and everything that happens in Wellington. So the combined hybrid advisory group, I think, would actually achieve this.
Councillor Chung, please, could you reframe it to a question?
Yep, okay, so do you see any downside to the, if you have the advisory group, do you see any downside in people thinking that their own individual cultural aspects are being ignored or sidelined? Is there a danger in that with a hybrid group?
I think it can be managed. Obviously, people come with their own passions. I mean, that's why they're involved in their communities and are attracted to being part of a model. But I think what we can do is actually, with the clarity of role, they can understand. And I think all the people I've spoken to have understood that they are part of a wider community, and that there are trade-offs and understandings to be created. And I think the advantage of this is that it's transparent. Currently, it already happens, but we have not been consistent in taking people right through the journey to realise what the decision is and why that decision's been made, and how their advice has actually been involved in that decision-making process.
Okay, no, I think that's good. Thank you.
Councillor Matthews.
With the chair's latitude, I'll give a very brief amount of feedback, which to say I think this is magnificent. But if I'm allowed to talk later about why, I would. So I have two questions. The first is, which is probably a yes/no, and I just wasn't clear. It was probably in the slides, but I might have missed it. Elected members would still be an elected member assigned to the group, the identity group. Is that's meeting more often or not?
Not in the proposed model, because what we would do is those, the individual advisory groups would create their own space for deliberation. But what the advantage of the involvement of elected members at the panel is it reinforces the importance of the panel and the importance of those intersectional interactions, and provides an opportunity for all elected members to be connected. There would be, however, breakouts within that, and you might find that particular elected members who have a particular interest and connection to a particular identity group would spend time with the group in that space, but it would be within that panel part of the model.
Thank you. And the second question is, because I know, having participated in this process, and I'm thinking about the alignment to the triennium. And so the triennium change is, I guess, that opportunity you talked about, a kind of a real reset for each kind of group, not only reapplication, but a kind of a check-in, about how we're kind of doing things, as well as kind of a new kind of induction and, a kind of responsiveness. Yeah.
Yes, and in addition, we were thinking of following Auckland's example, where they actually do an evaluation every year as well. So I think we need to be much more responsive and onto it. And so there would be some kind of feedback mechanism each year, and then we would do a review at the 3-year mark, and it would also fit the role within the triennium. So the recruitment would happen very shortly after the election, and then the groups would close, similar to Auckland, just before the next election.
I remember talking about evaluation in the session that I did, so I'm very happy to see that is being. Thank you.
Councillor Pennant.
Thank you for your work. The groups, what are their views on what option they would like? Have you got any understanding of that?
In the last week, I've met with all the co-chairs, and there might be, I know that we have some co-chairs online, and they may have views themselves. I've met a series with the co-chairs, and we've had a very long conversation with the members as I've gone through, and we've created this together. There will obviously be a range of views right across the membership, but as this is gelled in the last few weeks, we've been most closely working with the co-chairs, who largely gave some great feedback, but there will be a range of views.
Okay. One of my questions is that essentially these groups have become a de facto way of doing some work for a particular community when we don't have a section within council that does the work. So if we move to a different model, how will that happen? So for example, because my experiences with disability and track, where that's a real constraint, right?
Yeah, I think what we're finding is there's a maturation within the council of some capability and capacity, but we also need to lift that, especially in being mindful that we have a strategic approach that relates to inclusion and accessibility. So there's work going on there. But I think also as part of the steering group, we've had connected communities involved in this work as well, and being mindful of who has the technical expertise or the link. You know, we have a specific person for accessibility. I think also paralleling that within the organisation and pulling on their expert knowledge as well.
And so then there is just the last question about, will we be able to increase the resources, because it might require us actually to have quite big teams. Obviously we've got a rates discussion at the moment, but we might need 5 people doing work on disability issues, not 1.
And then ultimately the resources will be dictated by the work program, but we're happy to take feedback in that space. But we do recognise more broadly in terms of the model of advisory groups, it needs more support from larger areas of the organisation. So it does receive a lot of support from Democracy Services at the moment in various areas of the organisation, but going forward it will need, the new model will need more support from a wider area of the organisation to make it work well.
Councillor Free.
Yeah, thank you. I'll make some comments later, but just to ask, with the ethnic group, you've still got the Pacific Advisory Group. How would you explain or justify the reasons behind keeping, that ethnic group separate from the others? Because I can imagine questions being asked, that's all.
I think there's a different relationship with the Pacific given our own colonial past and also the size of the Pacific community in New Zealand, but in actual fact we're following the lead of ethnic communities and the ministry and their definition as well. We'll move to a very similar model because we're moving to smaller groups, and so it would be the same number across the group for the Pacific Advisory Group as the same number across ethnic communities. Currently, Pacific Advisory Group has specific nominations or representation, and I think that places an additional burden on them, and it's also been very difficult to fill all those slots.
We have Maria from Pacific Advisory Group that's just put their hand up if you'd like to contribute to the answer.
Can I just ask another question that might
Sarah,
be able to be answered?
Maria might be able to help answer your question.
The other question was about voting, because they're elected, whereas the others aren't, so that can be answered as well. That'd be good.
Okay, I'll offer to Maria.
Kia ora. And yeah, just adding to what's just responding to the question, I think the key difference there is we have a relationship, the Pasifika communities have a very strong relationship historically with Aotearoa. So there is a clear difference between the creation of the Pacific Advisory Group and that of the Ethnic Advisory Group as well. Yes, there are similarities in terms of the different ethnicities that sit within that, but I think we've got a strong basis in why there is a clear separation there.
Thank you, Maria.
Councillor Abdirahman.
Thank you for the work, and you guys did a really amazing job in this space, and I had a good feedback from ethnic community especially. My question is, when it comes to that combined model where you have all the 5 of them, they will have their own committee, and there is another one here, what the combination of that combined one looks like? Is that based on the percentage of the population they have, or how many people you're going to have in that combined
Currently, the model looks at bringing all the members together, so it would make quite a large group together. So one of the differences we'll be making is really strong facilitation of the panel, with expert facilitation and allowing breakout groups to manage the sizes involved. Whereas in the individual advisory groups, it will be a partnership between a mid-level manager here in council providing support and the co-chairs to manage however they wish to in the smaller groups. So there'll be a marked difference between how the look and feel of the 2 levels of the hybrid model.
Do you think in that case, when it comes to that composition, even to begin with the number of how many, one of the group, how many members they can have, should be structured in the way that reflects the population according to the statistics?
We're actually structuring around the advice and research that we've looked at to group formation. So the proposal is that the advisory groups are a number of 8, which the literature supports as a good group to have diverse views, to develop a position and some initial thoughts for the advisory group members, and then bringing them into the panel space so it's completely transparent, that they will see that their advice and thoughts are being brought into the larger space and then supported by the facilitator to be heard. We're not expecting that when all those people come together that they will all exactly agree. We're looking for the areas of agreement and a recording of where the views are different. It's based around the optimum size for making the model work rather than something statistical across the city, which is leaning more towards a citizens' assembly style initiative, which is highly likely to be used again because the advisory groups are only one of the engagement tools that we'll be using.
Cool. Colleagues, thank you. We've rolled through quite a few partai questions, so I'm just going to hand over to you now. Maybe perhaps if you had any constructive feedback going into this process, feel free to provide yours. Councillor Matthews.
I just want to say I think you have done an amazingly elegant job of retaining the things that people wanted to see retained about the model, which is, they still wanted to organise in their own groups and still have, and I actually, as a councillor who's worked very intensively with a group the entire time I've been on council, I can see the benefits for me not being in the room as they organise, and, because I do feel that if the group is operating more effectively and supported and the role is clearer, I can see my role becoming less necessary. And so I really appreciate that, but I also, think that those panel meetings will look like an amazing experience to be part of, and having attended the citizens, I know that's a different model, but that really impactful, and I do see an opportunity for. I think that, thinking about AAG, they've been really crying out to operate on a more strategic level. And I think that that this model provides for that. So I honestly see nothing that I personally, I need to read a paper and see in more detail, but there is nothing that I feel is uncomfortable about or that doesn't represent an improvement to what we currently do. So just absolute kudos to you, Sam. It's been a great process to be part of, and I really, look forward to kind of doing some more, talking about this, but I'm extremely thrilled with what you've come out with, so congratulations.
Kia ora. Maria online.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Apologies, me again. I just thought it would be quite helpful to note that within that hybrid structure, we have the panel, which is noted as all members being part of that just those discussions alongside council members and leadership team. I have offered this suggestion, and this is in support of the team and kind of aligns with a question earlier around having to increase support for the advisory groups. I think there is a benefit in actually reducing the number of the people within that panel. So you only have the co-chairs who attend those strategic sessions rather than it being open to all members. The benefits in that is it actually allows for quite robust conversations. You'll still have the diversity of thoughts, but it gives co-leaders the opportunity to take responsibility for the views that come from the individual groups. That allows the council team to be able to support a much smaller group. I've been in some sessions where it's been quite open to everyone, and it's a lot harder to manage, especially when you've got people connecting online as well. So that is something that we've presented to Sam and the team as well as a way to support each other, so it's a lot manageable and easier to coordinate. I think you'll still be able to get the diversity in thoughts, but it gives the co-chairs an opportunity to lead on behalf of their individual groups as well. So I thought I'd just note that as part of the feedback.
Thank you, Maria. Councillor Free.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. And that question I asked before about Pacific Advisory Group was not in any way to criticise, because I know myself for how much value they add, but just to say that I think that's something that probably needs a bit of explanation. But I didn't get the question answered about whether they would still, because they're a bit different because they have an elected model. Is it proposed in the new structure to continue with that or to move to something else?
No, they're a bit of an outlier at the moment, and I think it's placing additional burden on the particular members because it's reinforcing. Oh.
So are you saying it would move to being an appointed model?
Just to be clear, they currently do use an appointed model. PAG used to be elected.
Oh,
but
okay.
I think not for a few years now. So they are appointed the same as all the other
okay.
ones.
That must have happened, the change there must have happened prior when I wasn't actually involved. Okay, I didn't pick that up actually, which is interesting. Thank you. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Sean. Councillor McNulty.
Sorry, just want to say thank you for this work. I know with anything, this big status quo bias is a real thing. You go, well, we've got an existing model, and that's sort of what you've normalised, and it's really hard sometimes to think about changes and big changes, but you guys have done that, and you've taken to it with a really clear evidence-based approach. I know your trips up to Auckland have been really helpful, and just with your engagement in youth council. So I just think this is a delightful piece of work where you've really reimagined substantively what this model could look like to be most effective. So yeah, just want to endorse everything that's come through, and thank you and your team for all the hard work. But yeah, it's really amazing to actually see such in-depth consideration, so well done.
Cool. Councillor Pennant and then Michelle online.
Yeah, thank you very much. And look, I don't really have a view at the moment because I just need to read the paper and consider. But there are just a few issues I want to raise. I probably don't agree with having a middle manager. I think the ELT role is really important if we want to get stuff done. Unfortunately, the way our organisation is structured, it comes from there, and particularly when we don't have other staff in the organisation able to work with the group, I think that is quite important. I take Councillor Matthews' point about the councillor role. I think it is a good state. But I would also, my experience has been too, that having a councillor in the room has been useful to get things done. Things have not happened because just having someone who can say, well, look, this is what's happening and this is how you navigate the system and these are the people that are important too. And I would just say, look, I'm, and this is a general point, I'm deeply sceptical about structural change. As you know, my issues, as I've said to you, have been around agenda planning and just not having enough structure so that we can actually get meaningful things done. in saying that we've got an action plan that we're working on at the moment for track, and that's good. That is a productive and useful thing, I think, to be doing. And then just the last thing is, look, Michelle's going to talk, but I am curious about ERG's views on that, so I'll listen with interest. Thank you.
Michelle.
Oh, kia ora koutou katoa. I just firstly would like to acknowledge the work that's gone into this, and just to reiterate again the care that's been taken in the consultation process and the thoroughness in which this has been researched. It's been really a great process to be part of from that perspective. So just really want to say that thank you very much, officers involved. You've done a great job. So just two things. Firstly, I just wanted to respond to Maria's comment. I guess I have a nervousness if I loved the idea of the panel because everyone was going to be there and there would be complete transparency. I worry, have myself being a co-chair, just how easy it is to not feedback fully, to think you've got one perspective but you haven't got all of them. And I do believe very strongly as a professional facilitator myself that with good facilitation and proper structured process in a large forum, you can get a lot of opportunities for in-depth discussion and quality from a large group. It is entirely a facilitator's problem, and a facilitator will have the solutions if they are properly trained and professional. So I just really wanted to reiterate that, because while I appreciate Maria's comments about growing a role of co-chairs and leadership, I also just have a nervousness that we'll see more of the same, of people feeling Chinese whispers and not involved and unclarity if we don't have that openness at the panel level, where that cross connection just builds so much by way of quality understanding. Coming back to ERG and us as a reference group with a slightly different role, I can see the benefit of what you are proposing. I still haven't had the chance to fully consider it, and will want to be talking with Summer and everyone else on ERG before going further. I do see that we have a slightly different function, and so to some degree that makes sense. I have a wondering, I know that the environmental reference group can be useful to some of the other groups because we understand things like the resource management planning process, which are extremely difficult for others to get their head around. And I just wonder if we could be made use of to the wider groups in some way. I'll just leave that as an open question, and that'll be amongst the things that I'll be wanting to take back and talk with colleagues in the group. But thank you very much again for the consideration. I really appreciate it.
Kia ora, Summer's in the room.
Oh, great. Summer, you can add on if you like.
Kia ora. Yes, I was just going to add on that the ERG's purpose as a technical advisory group does obviously clash with the expectation of council to have a full understanding of the environmental impacts of all of its projects already. However, there is still definitely room for the ERG as a heart monitor for the biodiversity of our city, and making sure that the to and fro's of politics within council are not losing sight of the direction that we are wanting to go as a city, and making sure that with switches between collectivism and individualism, we are not straying too far from our long-term goals and not forgetting the urgency of the environmental work within the city. If council genuinely feels that it can hold those views close whilst they do their work separate from the ERG, amazing. But the ERG has definitely played a big role in the past in trying to push for more ambitious work. And I feel that in our second option of the hybrid model, there's definitely room for us to continue to do that effectively.
Ngā mihi Summer. Uh, Deputy Mayor Fern.
Yeah, kia ora. Thank you to the team. This is, I have to agree with a lot of Councillor Matthews' comments that I think this upholds the mana of everybody in what you're proposing, but just given that there are still some things to work through. So thank you to Summer and Michelle for bringing your perspective, and I see you not as an outlier, but just contributing in a different way, which is vital. Your work is vital to the city, so thank you. But I think just in terms of, to me, this model looks like it'll help celebrate our diversity even more and really help by bringing into, as you've said, more of the strategic conversations, which will really help council even more and help the city to understand, and celebrate and make visible, as we've heard this morning. So I think really good job, and thank you for the work that you've done.
Thank you all. Colleagues, I see no further hands up. Oh, apologies, peripheral vision.
No, I just, sorry, and I've already spoken, but I just, when I saw Erica's name, face on screen, kia ora, Erica, I just wanted to, talking about the less meeting driven, and I'm wondering if that, in any, and whether that's part of this conversation, is about the work that goes on outside of meetings and recognising that through the remuneration, particularly of the co-chairs, because if we are less kind of focused on a meeting, that has it does have and it doesn't recognise the work that takes place outside of that kind of meeting format. So is that part? Will any of those issues be considered? As I know we have. Very real resource constraints, is there any thought been given to that particular issue?
Yes, we've been very mindful. There hasn't been a change recently in the way we remunerate, so it is part of our consideration of the resourcing for this model.
Ngā mihi. I see no further hands up for feedback. I just wanted to look into next steps. I understand a paper is coming to the next Koro Mātinitini meeting on the 28th of November.
Right. Yes.
Aye, cool.
Yes. Yes, so I will be still communicating with the advisory groups and available to attend any of the meetings as we continue to have our conversations. But I expect also the co-chairs will be reporting back to those groups. We will be bringing a paper on the 28th of November and look forward to a further discussion. Thank you.
Kia ora, Sam, and just to acknowledge again a really big thank you from Summer and Michelle from the Environmental Reference Group, Sam from the Takatapui Rainbow Advisory Group, Maria from the Pacifica Advisory Group, and Erica from the Accessibility Advisory Group. Ngā mihi for your time, and thank you so much for all working really collaboratively on this. It's really great to see some of the results coming out of it. Ngā mihi.
Kia ora.